What began as a light-hearted exchange on a live talk show took an unexpected and unforgettable turn. During a star-studded episode of Evening with Celebrities, the atmosphere was lively and electric. On one couch sat Hollywood legend Will Smith, all charm and charisma. Across from him, in a modest suit and quiet composure, sat President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. The segment was meant to be light and fun, friendly banter, quick laughs. The host, grinning, nudged Will with a question. "So, Will, ever thought of running for president? You'd be up against this guy." Will chuckled, playing along. "I'd at least bring some style to the table," he joked. "No offense, President Traoré, but it looks like your tailor gave up halfway." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Traoré smiled politely. There was no malice in Will's voice. Just a quip, the kind that fills late-night shows. But then, the energy in the room shifted. President Traoré leaned forward, hands gently clasped. He waited for the laughter to subside, his eyes meeting Will's. When he spoke, his voice was calm, not angry, not amused. And yet, what he said brought the entire studio to stillness. "I don't wear power," he said softly. "I carry it." The room fell silent. "In Burkina Faso," he continued, "there are villages without electricity. Children walk miles barefoot to learn beneath trees. If I wore a 5000 suit, I'd be stealing from them." Will's smile faded. "You make films that move the world, make it laugh, cry, and reflect. I carry lives. Every decision I make, even in silence, holds weight. If style could heal a broken hospital, I'd wear gold." No one clapped, no one laughed. The moment was raw, pure, honest. Traoré's words weren't an attack. They were a mirror, held up with grace. Will blinked slowly, his posture shifting. It wasn't about the joke anymore. It was about the truth behind the man he'd tried to tease. And in that quiet, the cameras caught something rare, tears in Will Smith's eyes. He looked away quickly, but the world saw. Within hours, the 90-second clip titled, "Will Smith Humbled by President Ibrahim Traoré's Words," had gone viral. Millions watched. Millions felt. The comments poured in. "That wasn't just a clapback. That was truth wrapped in grace. I showed this to my 12-year-old. We both cried." Backstage, the mood was somber. Not uncomfortable, just contemplative. Will sat alone, sipping water, lost in thought. A producer gently asked, "You okay?" He nodded but said nothing. Later, Will found President Traoré seated quietly in a dressing room, reading a small book. Will hesitated, then approached. "Mr. President." Traoré looked up with that same gentle smile. Will's voice cracked. "I needed that." "Thank you." They shook hands, one man from Hollywood, the other from the Sahel. In that simple gesture, the world saw something profound: humility, respect, truth. By morning, the internet was ablaze. News outlets replayed the moment. Influencers reacted through tears. Even major networks that rarely covered African leaders were now speaking of Ibrahim Traoré. The trending caption was just 5 words. When dignity spoke, the world listened. In Burkina Faso, marketplaces paused. Radios replayed the clip. Children, elders, farmers, and students watched with quiet pride. They didn't see him as just a politician anymore. To the people of Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré had become something more: a father figure. Steady, graceful, and deeply human. Across the ocean in the United States, Will Smith released a short video. The tone was different, no flashy edits, no background music at first. "I joked on TV," he said quietly. "He gave me wisdom. I've been in rooms with kings and legends," he added. But this hit differently. He wasn't reading from a script. He wasn't performing. He was humbled, and people noticed. But beyond the headlines, applause, and viral buzz, something deeper had begun to stir. Something President Traoré hadn't orchestrated. His words, simple, sincere, were planting seeds. Seeds of reflection, of change. Across the world, people weren't just listening. They were looking inward. Traoré hadn't intended to become a symbol. But that night, he became more than a leader. He became a mirror, showing people something they'd forgotten how to see in themselves. And soon, the world's heart would be tested again. This time in a quiet hospital room in Ouagadougou. 11-year-old Muna was fighting leukemia. She had watched the clip of President Traoré with her mother the night before. Her eyes, dimmed by illness, lit up as she watched. "Mama," she whispered, "he's not like the others." With a trembling hand, she scribbled a short note. "Can we send this to him?" she asked. A nurse, moved by Muna's fragile hope, posted a photo of the letter on Twitter with a caption, She has days left, but she wants to thank her president. The letter read, "Dear President Traoré, I'm sick, but when I saw you on TV, I forgot my pain for a moment. You made me proud. You didn't shout. You didn't laugh back. You just spoke like a real papa. Thank you. I wish I could hug you." By noon, the tweet had over 2 million likes. At the Burkinabe Embassy in New York, President Traoré sat in a quiet room when he saw the post. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, slowly, he slipped on his jacket, and turned to his aides. "Cancel the next meeting," he said. "I need to call a child." At the hospital, Muna's mother answered the phone, bewildered. "Hello." A warm, composed voice replied, "Madame, this is President Ibrahim Traoré. May I speak with your daughter?" The room froze. The nurse gasped. Muna's eyes widened in disbelief. He spoke gently to her, asking about her favorite color, her favorite food. She giggled softly through the pain. "Are you really the man from TV?" she asked, barely above a whisper. He chuckled kindly. "Yes, little one," he said. "But more importantly, I'm your friend." Tears streamed down every face in the room. "You've already done more than many adults in this world," he told her. "You reminded us to be kind." Then, his voice broke slightly. "You are stronger than me, Muna." After they hung up, Traoré sat in silence. He looked out at the New York skyline, but his mind was with a brave little girl in a small hospital room filled with courage. That night, he made a decision. He wasn't going to be just a trending moment. He was going to be a reason. Back at the studio, long after the cameras stopped rolling, the air remained still. Will Smith stood behind a curtain, hands shaking slightly, the echo of Traoré's words still heavy in his chest. Crew members moved quietly, unsure of what to say or how to process what they just witnessed. Will stepped forward. "You meant it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Traoré nodded. "I don't speak to impress," he replied. "I speak because truth should be lived, not performed." No cameras, no stage lights, just two men, one known for his charm, the other for his courage, standing in a moment of unfiltered truth. Traoré looked at Will and saw something deeper. "You carry the world's laughter, Will. But have you ever let the world hear your pain?" That single question cracked something open in the actor. He nodded, eyes glassy, words caught in his throat. Outside the studio, the internet was already buzzing. The clip had been reposted thousands of times, but what was unfolding now wasn't about virality. It was about healing. In Philadelphia, Will's mother, Caroline, sat alone in her living room, watching the moment unfold on her screen. She had seen her son in blockbusters, on red carpets, in front of roaring crowds, but never like this. And she, too, wept, not out of sadness but recognition, because that night the world didn't just watch a president speak, it listened. And something shifted. She'd laughed. She'd cried. She'd felt deeply watching her son's movies. But never like this. Will's mother texted him that night. "You've made movies, baby. But tonight, you made meaning. That man reminded me of your father. Calm, firm, kind. Don't lose this moment." Will stared at the screen, the message glowing in the dark. You made meaning. He hadn't cried in front of his mother since he was a teenager. But now, the tears came, quietly and completely. Something in President Traoré's words had pierced a long, buried part of him. About worth, about image, about being seen not for fame, but for truth. He took a long breath and opened the Notes app on his phone, not to write a joke, not a script, but a letter. A letter to the man who had touched his soul, without even trying. The next morning, Will posted it to Instagram, alongside a still photo of President Traoré, standing calmly on set. It read, "President Traoré, you didn't clap back. You didn't laugh it off. You gave me truth. In your stillness, I saw my storms. In your dignity, I saw my doubts. You reminded me, and maybe reminded the world, that a man doesn't prove his strength through force or flash, but in how he carries truth. Thank you. I'm learning, I'm listening." The post exploded. Millions shared it. Politicians commented. Parents used it to teach their children. Young people wept. And in Ouagadougou, Traoré's office was flooded with letters from around the world. But one letter stood out. It wasn't from a celebrity, or a diplomat, or a journalist. It was from a little boy in Harlem. The last line simply read, "I want to be calm like you, when people laugh at me." President Traoré folded the letter slowly. He looked up at his advisors and said, "This isn't about what happened on TV anymore. Something is waking up. On the other side of the world. In Brooklyn, a 12-year-old boy named Marcus sat on the edge of his bed. He'd been bullied that day, pushed, laughed at for wearing worn-out shoes. His mom made him tea, but it didn't ease the ache in his chest. That night, she scrolled through her phone and came across the now viral video of President Traoré and Will Smith. She turned up the volume. Marcus looked up. The president's voice rang out. "The world does not need louder men. It needs quieter hearts with deeper truths." Marcus froze. He replayed that one line 10 times. Then, slowly, he reached under his pillow and pulled out a worn notebook. He began to write, "Dear Mr. Traoré, today I was laughed at. But I didn't scream. I remembered your voice. I think that made me strong." He folded the letter and tucked it away. He didn't know if he'd ever send it. But in writing it, something shifted. For the first time in weeks, Marcus slept through the night. Back in Ouagadougou, President Traoré sat in his modest office, scrolling through messages his staff had carefully filtered. One email stopped him cold. A scanned letter, handwritten, from a schoolboy named Marcus. He read it 3 times, in silence. Then he looked out the window and said to his aide, "We lead nations. But sometimes, we just need to hold one child's pain." Without hesitation, he asked for a call to be arranged. That same evening, Marcus was called to the school counselor's office. His heart raced. He thought he was in trouble. Instead, someone handed him a phone. "Hello," he asked. A warm voice replied, "This is Ibrahim Traoré. I read your letter." Marcus froze. He thought it was a prank. But the voice continued, "You are stronger than many adults I've met. And I want you to know, you gave me hope today." Marcus cried. Not the loud kind. The quiet, trembling kind. The kind that comes when, for the first time, someone sees you. The next day, without cameras or headlines, Will Smith arrived in Ouagadougou. No entourage, no announcement. Just a man in simple clothes, walking with a quiet purpose. When Traoré saw him, he smiled and said, "I didn't expect Hollywood to come so humbly." Will chuckled, then paused. "I came because what you said didn't just touch me, it changed me." They sat beneath a tree in the courtyard of a local school. Children played nearby, their laughter ringing through the air, unaware that a piece of history was quietly unfolding just feet away. Will handed President Traoré a folded sheet of paper. "This," he said, "is a list of every apology I owe, from my past, from the pain I carried into other people's lives, from the shadow side of fame." Traoré unfolded the paper and read the names. Then he looked up and said softly, "Healing doesn't begin when we fix the world. It begins when we tell the truth to ourselves." Just then, a small girl ran up to Will and offered him a flower. He knelt smiling. There were no grand speeches, no stage, no applause. But in that simple gesture, Will felt something more human than he had in years. And the cameras, they weren't needed. In a dusty barbershop on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, a group of young men crowded around a flickering TV. It replayed the now famous moment, Will Smith's light-hearted jab followed by a long silence. And then, Traoré's voice echoing across the globe. Idris, one of the young men, wiped his eyes. "It's the first time I've seen a president speak with his soul." The barber, an old man who had lived through many regimes, nodded slowly. He didn't just speak to Will. He spoke to all of us who've been laughed at for being quiet, for being different. That day, in that humble shop, the clip didn't just trend, it transformed. They turned off the TV and sat in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because they had just witnessed something pure in a world that so often felt cold. 2 days later, a handwritten letter arrived at the Burkinabe embassy in Los Angeles. It was from Jada Pinkett Smith. She had watched the moment live. Then again, then cried. The letter wasn't formal. It was raw. It was real. "Dear President Traoré, I don't know if you realize what you did, not just for Will, but for millions of men watching. Men who've never been told that dignity doesn't mean domination." With no raised voice, "You taught the world that calm isn't weakness. It's strength, in its quietest form. You have no idea how badly this world needed that message." Traoré read the letter alone. He folded it carefully and placed it inside his journal. Then, turning to his aide, he said, "We don't need louder speeches. We need louder silence, followed by deeper actions." Across continents, something unusual began to happen. Clips of Traoré's words were translated into Mandarin, Arabic, French, Portuguese, Swahili. Not because they were trending, but because truth finally had a voice. Universities held panel discussions. Psychologists published essays. Churches and mosques shared the clip in sermons. People weren't just watching, they were pausing their lives to reflect. Even a late-night comedian who had initially mocked the moment returned on air to say, "I thought it was just another awkward talk show clip. But now I see, it was history being made quietly." In Burkina Faso, a school renamed its library after President Traoré, not for politics, but for the quiet voice of truth. This was no longer about Will Smith or television. It had become a symbol, a turning point, a mirror, and the world couldn't look away. 3 days after the moment went viral, Will made an unannounced appearance on a daytime show in New York. No jokes, no script, just a chair, a mic, and a man who had clearly been changed. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke. "I've made movies. I've made millions laugh. But I've never had a moment stop me like that." He paused. When President Traoré looked at me, it was like he saw through the performance. Not just mine, but the one the world makes us wear every day. There was a long silence. Then, almost a whisper, he reminded me what it means to be a man, not through power, but through peace. No applause, just stillness, and a few quiet tears. That night, Traoré's assistant rushed into his office. "Mr. President, it's from Will." The email was brief, but raw. "I've spoken with my heart to the world. Now I'd like to speak with yours. I want to come to Ouagadougou, not as an actor, just as a man." Traoré smiled gently. "Let him come," he said. "Let him see where real truth grows, not in palaces but in pain." The next morning, Will landed in Burkina Faso. No paparazzi, no red carpets, just Traoré. Waiting in a plain shirt, hand outstretched, they embraced. No words, just understanding. Two lives separated by fame, continents, and culture, crossed paths in a moment the world would never forget. On the 6th day, an impromptu press conference was held outside a youth center in Ouagadougou. Will stood beside Traoré. His voice was steady. This man didn't clap back. He didn't fight fire with fire. He showed me, and all of us, what dignity looks like when the world expects pride. He looked straight into the camera. If you're watching this, ask yourself, when was the last time you listened with your heart? Traoré stepped forward, speaking barely above a whisper. "We don't heal by mocking. We heal by recognizing the wounds in each other." The crowd didn't cheer. They stood in silence, moved, grounded, awake. The clip went live. Within 24 hours, it had 40 million views. But it wasn't about numbers. It wasn't for entertainment. Across homes, offices, and classrooms, people cried, not from spectacle, but from seeing something pure in a fractured world. Dear reader, if this story touched something in you, if even a single moment stirred your heart, don't just click away. Let it sit with you. Let it grow roots. And if you feel moved, share it. Not for the algorithm, but because someone else out there might need to feel what you just felt. Tell us what part moved you most. Let this not be the end.